Hey, subscribers. How y'all doing? I want y'all to bear with me because I'm going to try to go as slow as possible. But I'm going to try to quantify some things so you can understand some things when you're looking at any subwoofer. Here we have the Image Dynamics ID8D4, and we have the DB Drive G1. Yeah, G1. WDX G1D4. Looking at these most drivers, most newbies would assume, based on size, that this woofer here has a stronger motor force. This woofer here, due to its taller surround, has more X-Max. So I gotta keep them apart. Actually, I'll tell you why later. I keep them apart. There's a lot of stuff going on right here between the two. So they will assume that this one, because it's larger, has a higher motor force, has more X-Max, and this one will hit the lows better than this one, especially since it doesn't have a high surround. And that's why I tell you these parameters are very important, because these numbers tell you what these subs will do. If you're watching this video and you're saying, yeah, I want this one, which I think watching the video, it'll be the one on my left to you, but it's actually the one on the right. But you would want this subwoofer here. So I want this one. It looks just more rugged, beefier. And you couldn't be further from the truth in some aspects, because each of these subwoofers have a 2-in-4 core. Both of them. But let me tell you what the specs tell you. One is very, very geared toward ported enclosure and a sealed enclosure. And one is more geared toward an infinite baffle and a ported enclosure. Needs a ported enclosure to be able to do what this one can do without the ported enclosure. If you say this one has a high X-Max because it's surround, you are very, 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 very off. Very, very off. This one has more X-Max, 14 millimeters of excursion with the shallow surround. This one, my illustrious friends, has 12. Some of you say, well, okay, but this one has a stronger motor force, so it doesn't matter, because the motor is bigger. The motor force is the force that's enacted upon the voice coil that's inside here. I don't know if y'all can see it in there. Yeah, the voice coil, when electricity is applied to the transducer subwoofer. And you would think, because obviously visually this one looks larger because it's broader and it's maybe a little taller. Well, actuality, the motor force in this one is significantly weaker, significantly weaker than the motor force in this one. Motor force in a dB is 10 Tesla meters. The motor force in the Image Dynamics is 13. So the motor force advantage is here. The X-Max advantage is here. But let me quantify and put this. They both handle the same power. Well, this one says 600. This one says 500. They both of them are conservative. Trust me. They can both handle the same power. This what you consider a smaller driver can handle the same power and reach his linear X-Max as this driver. Forget what anybody has told you about Image Dynamics. Just throw that out the window, okay? Size, like I told you in earlier videos, means nothing. Numbers do not lie. Now let's interpret the numbers of why the motor force is less here with the larger subwoofer than the greater here. Well, let's look at the FS. The FS of this sub is 55. The FS of the Image Dynamics is 35, which tells me, even though it's not listed here, that the MMS is greater here than here. The MMS is the weight of the soft parts. The weight of the soft parts is the in order, windings, former, the windings go on the former, spider, one or two, or three, or however many, cone, and surround. The weight of all those together are measured in grams. The heavier the MMS, the more grams you have on the soft parts. Normally, most of the time, the lower the FS. The more weight you have on the soft parts, the lower the FS, in most tends to be, the more motor force you're going to need to move those soft parts. So even though you might think this one looks bigger to your eye, the weight of the soft parts, all of this together, like I keep trying to pull each other again, the weight of the soft parts together, the weight of the soft parts together, the motor force is needed to move them. The greater the MMS, the lower the FS, most times. 90% of the time. The greater MMS, the lower the FS. The higher the MMS, the lighter the MMS, the weight of the soft parts, the weight of all the soft parts, the greater the FS. So this one has a FS of 35. I'm pretty sure the soft parts are heavier than this one. The soft parts on the DB drive is 150 grams. Being at 150 grams, it needs, the motor force needed to move that is 10 Tesla meters to move it in and out. And the motor force, this motor is passive. It does not become active until electricity is going to the tension leads and activates the soft parts. And when that electricity is moving back and forth, alternating current is moving back and forth on that coil, then the magnet is going to exert a certain amount of force in opposition to it. So if it's positive and then the coil is negative and the gap is negative, the coil is going to shoot forward. And when the opposite is true, then it's going to pull back. And that's all the motor force does. That's dictated by the Gauss, the magnetizer, and then there's a force that's measured, and that's the BL. The lighter the cone, lighter the MMS, the less motor force you're going to need. The heavier the cone, the more motor force you're going to need. The motor force has nothing to do with the size of the magnet. Understand that. The motor force exerted on the soft parts or exerted on the windings that's on the top of that former that you see when you look through the basket has very little to do. Very little to do with the size of the magnet. You're looking at these magnets, and I'm telling you, if you look at the gap and look on the paper, with the computer programs I use, they're telling you the motor force is greater here. The gap is closer to the windings here than it is here. And the reason why is because you don't have to be that close because the soft parts are lighter here. So since it's lighter, you don't need that much motor force to get them to move back and forth. But since it's heavier, this one has a tighter gap. This is the voice. This is the former, and the windings on top of it. The gap. Maybe this will show it. The gap is tighter on here, so you get more force exerted against the voice, the former, and the voice cord as it goes in and out. Whereas on this subwoofer, because the soft parts are lighter, the gap is opened up a little bit, so it can move. Okay? It's trade-offs in all this. And I'm going to get to the Hoffman's iron law because you need to understand that in designing your subwoofer enclosure and designing your system. But particularly when designing your subwoofer system. When you're looking and picking a driver, do not go by looks. Go by trade-offs. Now, This one has a lower QTS than this driver. It's more efficient as well because it has such a high BL. It's more efficient in turning signal into SPL, and that's why the SPL rating on this image dynamics is 82, whereas the SPL rating on this DB drive is 80, I believe. I believe it's 80. Yes, 80. So what does that mean? That means if you just take 1 watt, just send it 1 watt one time, and you had a meter, mic in front of each cone, at 1 watt, this driver will be louder than this driver. At 2 watts, this driver will be louder than this driver. All the way till you reach the RMS of this, it will be louder than this one. Once you reach that point, eventually the subwoofer that can handle more RMS will become louder. And that's why manufacturers tell you, particularly subwoofer manufacturers, do not pay attention to the sensitivity rating. Because power is cheap these days. But let me ask you a question. What if you don't have money to spend all that power? What if you can spend $200-300 on a subwoofer? You don't have $500-600 to pay on the amplifier. Then sensitivity rating is going to be very important to you. You're going to want to get the driver that can get louder quicker without needing that much power. Now this driver here, I say they roughly handle about the same, and maybe that's not necessarily true. I would say this one would top off about 650 watts. At 650 watts, if you just continue to play it, a watt is greater than that, you will destroy this subwoofer. This one is rated at 600. I'm going to do the same thing I had this one here. At 750 watts, anything greater than 750 watts, you're going to destroy the subwoofer. But I'm going to tell you something. This one's rated at 500, I say to go to 650. This was rated at 600 to go to 750. I added with 150 watts. The distance between 150, the distance between the two is 100 watts. Your ear cannot tell the difference between 100 watts. Let me say that again. You cannot tell the difference between a woofer getting 500 watts and a woofer getting 600 watts. In a perfect world, you could actually get that power to the sub. You cannot tell the difference. To your ear, they would both sound the same. Most people cannot tell that the one getting 600, the difference is so minute that you cannot really tell. Something to consider. I hear people erroneously say about the image dynamic, hey man, it's crazy lows, can't handle no power, can't get loud, can't generate SPL. Not true. Not true. Not true at all. Better design enclosure needed for this one, where this is more forgiving. 2 different applications at work here. This is more of a SQ drive, SQ loud, but can still generate SPL. This is more of an SPL driver, has a high FS, 55. It's made to get loud, but not as accurate as this one. You really need to put this one in the ported enclosure. It's not going to sound good in the sealed enclosure. But the QTS of this one is 0.4. 0.4 is close to 0.5. The QTS gives you an average of what a woofer can do. 0.5 in the middle range, you can go sealed or ported. This one is 0.4, 0.43, leaning heavily towards sealed. But you can also not too far away from ported. Whereas this one here, the QTS is 0.6, leaving heavily toward ported, not so much sealed. When you look at a subwoofer, you look at the TS parameters, look at that QTS, not the QTC, which is the Q of the system, everything together. But the QTS of the subwoofer, which is the average of the QES, which is the electrical system, electrical signals, which is this. The electricity going in, how does the windings interact with the gap? That's your electrical. And then you got your QMS, which is the mechanical. How does that play in the part with the surround, spider, and whatnot as it moves, staying linear. So the QTS is an average of that, right? Also common with the EBP, which is what the subwoofer is leaning toward with a seal ported. Well, you could just look at the QTS and tell that. If it's 0.5, you can go either way. 0.5 under, less than 0.5, you're leaning toward more than likely a seal. 0.4, it's great seal. Sound good in the 4/4. Sound good in the 4/4. You get the best of both worlds because you're not too far away from ported and not too deep in seal. Where ported, it won't sound good ported. All right, where it's not gonna have, it wouldn't have the mechanical ability to handle I forgot a Helmholtz resonator, a porting application. I'm trying to keep it very simple so you understand. Whereas this woofer here is greater than 0.5, so it needs, it's leaning heavy toward ported and 6/order. Infinite baffle, not really though. Infinite baffle, but it's leaning toward more the ported enclosure. It has enough QMS, a higher QMS than this woofer does, so it's able to control itself. It has to be able to control itself without the pressure behind it. Has a higher QMS. The mechanical on this is 4. The mechanical on this is 1.3. This woofer needs the enclosure. This woofer can its mechanical ability is able to control itself in an open environment, ported enclosure. Let me tell you how you can understand that. Let's look at this one. Has 2 spiders, a very high surround. 2 spiders. This one has a low surround, 1 spider. So it would benefit from having the acoustical dampening of a sealed enclosure. Whereas this one, because if it's greater control with the dampening it has with its own 2 spiders, it can control itself in an open air environment, leaning toward ported or 6/order. Do you understand why you're looking at 2 different woofers now and so many different things come into play with, man, I think I would go with this and go with that. You can't say this trumps this because this will trump this one in a sealed enclosure. This will trump this one in a 4th-order enclosure. They both got 2 voice coils, but they both get to a same result a different way. You see what I'm saying? Can you make this an SQ? Can you make, yeah, if you get your enclosure just right, you can make this sound just as good as this one. However, this one will do it a lot easier with less power because of the motor force, it's more efficient. Now I know some of you going to have to watch this video over and over and over and over again to get an understanding of what I'm truly trying to say. And that's why I'm doing this channel, so you will understand that you can never say this woofer trumps this one. When you ask me my opinion, man, do you think this is better than that? It all depends on the application, what you're going to use it for. It all depends on the application, what you're going to use it for. I mean, how much power you got to give. If you got a lot of power to give, run here if you just want loudness. But if you want to actually tonal quality and loudness, and you don't have a lot of power to give, you'll be better suited here. You will be louder on with a 500 watt here than you will with a 500 watt here. Well, I don't have enough room for a ported enclosure. Then you need to get a driver that's more suited for a sealed enclosure and can play down to the lower frequencies. You see what I'm saying? So never look at a subwoofer and say one is better than another. You're a newbie if you do that. I'm not going to do that on this channel. I might prefer a particular brand over another. I'm loving my G5s. I'm loving my DB Drive G5s. And why? Because I kind of mixed both of these in the G5. That's what they did. I have a low FS in my G5, 33 hertz. I have a very heavy cone, but I also have a good considerable amount of motor force to move that cone. So it's a trade-off between the two. And I'm going to elaborate in other videos about the different trade-offs and what you're looking for. And it's going to take a long time for this to really sink into your head. This might not be one of my most popular videos because it's 20 minutes, but it's so many different aspects of things to understand. But the basics is understand the MMS, the FS, how they relate to each other. Go back and watch the video as I explain how the MMS relates to the FS, and the MMS also relates to the motor force. And then the motor force has nothing to do with the size of the magnet. It's with how they in the gap. All right. I hope I burned your brain enough for the day. Stand by. I'm going to. I don't know. I'm gonna do something with one of these jokers. I'm really thinking I'm gonna shock y'all this weekend. I'm gonna build me a horn enclosure and put one of these jokers in a horn enclosure, and you're gonna be like, oh my God, what is a horn enclosure, and why is it in my headphone loud as hell? Later, man. Like, subscribe, share, and hit me up, man. Let me see if I can keep explaining to you in the way I talk and explain to people. I mean, everybody go different. You got different religions. Some people understand God the Lutheran way. Some people understand God the Protestant way, Jehovah's Witness way, Catholic way, Baptist way. Same thing with this cardio. I'm not gonna knock nobody. I listen to Cardio Fabrication, that guy there. Sometimes I go watch Bezo. Well, I forgot his name. The cardio guy, the little skinny white guy, real funny. Sometimes I watch Parker the Child. I don't hate on nobody, man, because knowledge is to be spread, and everybody understand. Everybody learns a different way. Some people can understand what I'm saying my way. Some people can't. They want the technical analysis. So I don't hate on nobody. I just try to get out the information to what I know, and realize that I'm constantly learning every day, because things are constantly changing in cardio, constantly. Peace.